ASI is a multi-stakeholder organization. Dialogue is at the heart of everything that we do and is critical to ensure that the organization delivers on its mission. We welcome all participants and value the diversity of backgrounds, views, and opinions represented at this meeting. We recognize that we have different opinions. That's the heart of healthy debate and leads to better outcomes. To ensure that our meetings are successful, we need to express our views and hear the views of others in a respectful and professional way, protecting the dignity and safety of all participants while enabling full participation from all attendees.
ASI acknowledges Indigenous peoples and their connections to their traditional lands, where we and our members operate. We aim to respect cultural heritage, customs and beliefs of all Indigenous peoples, and we pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. We especially welcome representatives of Indigenous communities attending our AGM webcast. And now, an important message regarding ASI's antitrust compliance policy.
Hello everyone, welcome to the 2021 Annual General Meeting of the Aluminium Stewardship Initiative. I am Anita Roper, the new Chair of the ASI Board of Directors, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. I've been informed that a quorum of members is present, and accordingly I declare the meeting open. With the COVID situation still impacting our ability to meet in person, we are again holding our event online. This year, we will start with some pre-recorded presentations, no PowerPoint, and then move into a live panel discussion with our Board of Directors. As we move through some pre-recorded presentations, please think about the questions you would like to ask as an ASI member. These can be raised through the Q&A box in Zoom. We will now be presenting a conversation between the CEO, Fiona Solomon, and myself, followed by reflections on ASI's first 5 years from Daniel Weston, ASI's inaugural board chair. We'll then hear thoughts on the global ESG context from Pippa Howard, ASI board director, followed by a progress report on the ASI Standards revision process from the Standards Committee co-chairs, Kendall Sosito and Rosa Garcia Pinedo. And finally, we'll hear about ASI's 2020 financial performance and the broader financial context from Sasha Corville, ASI Board Director and Finance and Audit Committee Chair. Thanks for joining us, and I look forward to hearing your questions and responses in the live panel session soon.
So welcome to being chair of ASI's board. Anita, we're really excited to have you stepping into this role.
Thanks, Fiona. I feel really privileged to be asked to be chair of ASI, though it's a little scary stepping into Daniel's shoes after the 5 years of Daniel as chair and the foundations that he's set for ASI and the fabulous job that he's done.
Yes, I think the organisation definitely owes him a debt of gratitude for his exemplary service to the organisation. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself to ASI members who haven't had the chance to meet you yet?
I've been fortunate to work on sustainability projects for some 20, 30 years, both here in Australia but also internationally. I've worked on projects in Iceland, Africa, North and South America, Europe, in fact in most places of the world where aluminium has been mined and processed. So I'm very excited to be able to continue to work in that space.
Well, we're really delighted to have you as part of the organisation.
One of our missions is to transform the aluminium sector. How can we do that?
So I guess we've tried to articulate a vision for that in terms of what we call our theory of change, where we have sort of long-term objectives, what might be medium-term objectives that are on the path to that, and then what sort of strategies we have in place to support that. That's work I know the board want to look at again. We set this as to sort of set our path for the initial development of the standards program and the certification program. I think once we get through this standards revision, we have another opportunity to sort of reflect on those questions, to engage with members on what are some of those sorts of, what's on the horizon, for this industry? What are some of the challenges that, ASI can play a role in? We know what topics the standard is covering in terms of sustainability issues. We know that things like responsible sourcing and how, we connect assurance claims through the supply chain becomes such an important part as the next step. Not just what you are doing, but what is your supplier, what is your customer doing? How do we have that whole value chain approach to embedding kind of sustainability and human rights principles in the way that aluminium is made and used and ultimately end of life collected? And we're looking at different ways that we can collect data and do studies on that to help understand, are we on the right track? Are we really delivering the sorts of things that we say we want to achieve? Is the standards program doing that? And what else, or how differently, might we go about to look to achieve those sorts of aims? One of the things that we want to focus on is how we tell the story of ASI and of the aluminium sector a bit more. There's work that we're doing to make the data that we collect through the certification program more accessible. We're developing a public dashboard that makes the information that we already publish more analysable, downloadable, accessible, this sort of thing. And then we want to look at new ways that we can visualise that data and really tell that story a bit better in ways that are accessible, that are up to date, and things like that. So that investment in the IT and the data visualisation side is a really strong focus that we want to have over the next few years. I think everybody's really keen to have data on what their supply chain is about, and again, for the purpose of being able to show the things that we're doing and making a difference. So we're seeing change, and we can evidence, what's going on is important. And so I think that's an important role that ASI can play in partnership with other organisations and our members who are custodians and are sharing that data as well. That aggregating role, I think, is an important one that we can play.
I know as an independent director, it was one of the things that I found most attractive to joining ASI was the transparency of the organisation and exactly that, the data that was available, the dashboard, the material, the openness of the organisation in terms of being clear about what we do and providing the evidence to back up what we do.
Current and potential members are really interested in that side of things. I think the aluminium sector as a whole is quite unique. Organisations like the International Aluminium Institute have decades of data on key issues which enables us to put the work we're doing at ASI in context. We, for example, with the chain of custody standard that we've developed, have collected initial data for the first year of implementation by, the first tranche of companies that have taken that up, that are looking at the flow of ASI aluminium, through that supply chain, and be able to put that into the context of global mass flows over time. That's such a powerful thing, and that's just one example of the sort of work that we want to kind of be increasingly getting involved in.
It's also coupled with that is the governance processes that go hand in glove
Right.
with ASI. I mean, it's leading edge, the governance handbook, the processes that the board follows, the members follow through the standards committee, through the standards revision process.
Exactly. So I think the governance piece that ASI has been set up around, I think is really robust. And I think that the kinds of discussions that would be happening through the standards revision process, where there's a range of different stakeholder perspectives, often there's agreement on what we're trying to get to, but not necessarily agreement on the best way to get there. And so, having an environment in which those perspectives can be shared, debated, and ultimately consensus built over time is really critical. And we need to all be doing that in a way that's respectful and doesn't lose sight of the interests of the organisation and the overall objectives that we have. But I think that's something ASI can be really proud of, is that, and a testament and a foundation, if you like, to how we've been able to get this far, and obviously sets us up for the ongoing kind of work and growth and long-term goals that we want to move towards.
Now it's moving ahead probably from what we're talking about, but horizon challenges, and I think of the work we're doing in the Indigenous space, leading edge. Right from the start, ASI set up the IPAF, the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Forum, as part of our governance structure. We didn't just pay lip service to it, but it's a formal part of how ASI does business. This industry perhaps has not always supported Indigenous communities as it should, yet it recognised that it needed to do things differently, and it's made this a strong part of its values in terms of the work that it does. But what more can it do? What are the other collaborations? How can we improve the way we work in this space? Are there other things that we can do? Are there other partnerships? Are there other spaces that we can work in?
Yeah, well, I think the Indigenous piece is a really important one, because even though if you're downstream in the aluminium value chain, it mightn't seem, a really critical issue, but where resources are coming from, and as we know, mining is, providing the bauxite that's fueling the sort of growth in demand, recycling and increasing that is essential, but it won't meet all demand as demand continues to grow. So understanding that, exploitation of resources has these environmental but also importantly social impacts disproportionately on Indigenous people because of where those resources are located, I think is just such an important thing for us to be grappling with. And we're uniquely positioned, I think, to do that. And so the work that we've done through the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Forum, IPAF, is super important. We've got some workshops that we're planning this year and next year in Australia, and then hopefully Guinea, COVID permitting, to kind of try and look at new models that are already happening, but that can be extended and can be an inspiration, hopefully, to evolving the way mining happens with new and existing developments.
And I think that's one of the things for ASI, is to look at how we can turn some of these challenges into opportunities. Where can we have the biggest impact? We sort of know where a number of the challenges are, greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity, and we are addressing those, or other groups are addressing them that are better placed to do that. I think for us, it's about prioritising and focusing on where we can have the biggest impact, where we can provide the biggest bang, if you like, and I think Indigenous communities might be one of those spaces.
Yeah,
but there may be others.
I'm sure there will be, and it's a case of, as we've had a really great financial year last year, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and it's been in the papers that went out to members, it's put us in a more secure financial position to take some longer term planning, and to be able to look at these kind of beyond certification questions, because we have a little bit more resources to do so. We're still a small organisation. We're still, around 15 people is where we're at now. Sort of a $3 million budget. So we're not a massive corporation with unlimited resources. So we, try to be really careful to kind of balance that out across the core business of the organisation, and then think carefully about what helps to extend and catalyse and help that to kind of grow, plant the seeds for different things. Because as you say, it's not just us, it's many stakeholders that are in this space. And so where we can, we always look for those sorts of partnership opportunities.
One of the areas we haven't touched on is people, the Secretariat.
Oh, yeah.
And as you said, we are a small organisation, and it's often said, you know, how do you do all the things that you do at ASI with the budget that we have? We are growing rapidly. We are doing more and more things. We have a great team there. Would you like to make any comments about the Secretariat?
Yeah, we do have a fantastic team. We're growing and bringing in sort of new expertise, which I think is really important. We're doing some work on culture, which you mentioned at the start as well this year, thinking about our team culture as we grow, you know, fairly rapidly. 5-6 years ago, we had effectively probably 2 full-time equivalent people, myself and a couple of part-time people, getting the program up and running. You know, sounds small, 15, but it's quite a change. You know, it's an evolution, and we want to make sure that we hold on to, I think, what makes us effective and able to work across, you know, different time zones and in a remote and asynchronous team. That's been really important in COVID, but of course people do still miss that sort of face-to-face side as well. So this work we're doing on thinking, how do we as a team continue to kind of bring the best of us to the table and the best of us to our work and with our members and stakeholders as well. Sadly, I think that's our 10 minutes, Anita. It's been really great to chat, and looking forward to the live panel discussion coming up.
Thanks, Fiona. I've also really enjoyed our conversation. I think it could have gone on for a lot longer, but I look forward to it continuing into the future with our respective roles.
Fantastic.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are around the world at this moment. This is a very bittersweet moment for me. I've been immensely proud and privileged to have been part of the ASI organisation over the last 5 years, but it's come the time for me to step down, and that's very important. It's really important that we have strong governance in this organisation, and that we make space for new thinking, new ways of doing things, and continuous improvement. And I'm delighted to be leaving this organisation in the very, very capable hands of Anita Roper and the team. Before I step aside, though, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes today to share some reflections, to look back a little bit at what we've achieved, and then think about how that applies, or lessons that we can bring to the future of the organisation. So, I think the first thing is to say that what we do at ASI collectively together is extremely important. It's important from two, I think, bases. One is protecting our planet and the future of our planet for generations to come. And it's about protecting people. It's about protecting the people who are not only within our value chain from a health and safety point of view, but people who are affected by our value chain. And I think specifically about the Indigenous people who are affected by the early stages of the value chain in bauxite mining and so on. ASI holds up a standard. We're a standards organisation after all, but we hold up a flag to say, what does good look like in this industry? And of course, what good looks like changes over time. So what good looked like back in 2016 and what good looks like in 2021 are different things. And we're an organisation that can change and adapt and move with that. And I think that's a really critical thing that we need to take with us into the future. But as I look back, I think about, what impact have we had? And it's actually quite humbling to think that in 2016, at the first AGM, which took place in Germany, we were 40 members. And at that time, we had a draft standard. Here in 2021, we have over 160 members. We have had 3 years of running the certification scheme. We have over 100 certifications have been issued, and we have certified operations in 40 different countries around the world. And that's an enormous achievement not by ASI in and of itself, but ASI and its members working closely together. So congratulations. That success, though, I think, is built on 4 things. And these are the things that I think, looking back, have been very important and I think will be critical going forward as well. The first thing is that ASI was built in an inclusive, multi-stakeholder way. The governance has always been very, very broad and very inclusive. And that has been critical. It's been critical in making sure, the key second point from my point of view, that the standards are completely holistic. They're not standards that focus on one element alone. This is not an organization that is all about climate change. It's about climate change, yes. It's about biodiversity, yes. It's about indigenous peoples' rights. It's about health and safety. It's about recycling and material stewardship. This is about the whole raft of issues that we need to address as an industry if our products are going to continue to be relevant in the future. The third element that I think has been critical has been, well, as in every human endeavour, has been the people who've been involved. You know, the commitment that we've seen, I think, to the standards and to ASI as a concept from the membership has just been extraordinary. The commitment to continue certifying operations during a pandemic year, frankly, it was astounding. I was completely blown away to see the number of certifications that have been issued over the past 12 months. The people, though, it's the people in the engine room of the organisation as well. And when I think about the engine room, I think about the standards committee, and I think about the working groups that have been working closely hand in glove with the standards committee, not only to develop the initial standard, but now going through the revision process, which has been very, very time intensive and has required huge commitment from everybody involved. It's about the Secretariat, and well, what can I say? We have a world-class Secretariat, we have a world-class CEO leading our organisation, and that makes all the difference. And finally, I'd like to say it's been an honour to serve with my fellow board members, men and women of very, very high calibre who really have a strategic view on ASI and its place in the world and its future in the world as well. And then finally, it's about having robust systems, really strong systems. And as I reflected on this, I thought, you know, we were very ambitious when we set out in 2016 with ASI. We built ASI so that it was already capable of existing at scale. And that's an unusual thing for what was effectively a startup. But I see now the value of the investments that we made in our structures and in our systems and tools has been absolutely critical and continues to pay dividends today. So what's the next chapter? The next chapter is, I think, to continue to build on those 4 strengths of this organisation. It's about continuous growth in certifications and continuous growth in terms of impact, positive impact on the world. It's about continuous improvement, constantly challenging ourselves to redefine what good looks like. And of course, that means revising the standards, and that process is ongoing. It's about having a very robust and resilient organisation. And I have to say, we've invested, again, for the future as we've built the organisation, and that's paid dividends, and I think it will continue to pay dividends as we continue to expand the organisation today. And I think the last thing has been about global relevance. It's about making sure that this inclusive approach that was the foundation stone of ASI continues. So this is not a standard that is relevant for any one particular region of the world. No, this is a standard that is relevant across the globe. So as I think about the future, I feel very, very confident. I think this organisation has got fantastic tools. This organisation has fantastic people. And what it will have standing on the sidelines from here on in is a strong ambassador cheering you on for future success and impact. Thank you.
Well, greetings from Cambridge in the UK. Here I am sitting probably where I've been sitting for the last year. But I want to talk to you about the environmental and social governance aspects of business, the materiality. We're facing a triple crisis in addition to the global pandemic. And all of us and all of them are critically connected to and dependent whilst impacting nature. We've not met one single aspect of the Sustainable Development Goals that we set out to get to by 2020. We've missed every single one of them, social, the environmental, and the economic ones. The climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis and the waste crisis are all environmental crises, and these are all playing out and delivering on economic uncertainty and social crises too. Now, if we reflect on how this affects ASI and the whole supply chain and the chain of custody, this is a unique organization because the promises, or at least the criteria and the kind of principles that sit within our standard are absolutely fundamental to managing these ESG, environmental and social governance risks. And they help us to understand and reflect how these risks and impacts can be managed so that we are essentially being responsible in the landscapes and the contexts, the social contexts that we're operating in. So if we look through how we adopt those and what this means from sort of cradle to grave, essentially, or from mine to widget or mine to kind of final product, it's absolutely essential that we take cognizance and are managing each of these aspects as we move through as a user, as a producer, as a consumer, right from, as I say, from the mine to the widget, to the computer. But we're also facing, this extraordinary, with the kind of climate COP coming in and the Paris Agreement, the huge pressure on different industries to actually change the way that they're doing things. And this huge push to decarbonize our future. We have to wean ourselves off fossil fuels. Now, aluminium is really important to so many different usages, and it's just how it's used in our day-to-day lives. We're all recognize that, but we're looking at a fantastically rapid transition to a decarbonized economy. We're looking at essentially the way that the oil and gas industry is transitioning, not necessarily out of oil and gas or out of fossil fuels, but certainly decreasing the amount of fossil fuels they're using, but looking for alternative energy sources. So the role of I guess, decarbonization, but also of the sort of surge in renewables is causing huge pressure on raw material supply chains. And we have to think about some of the externalities and the consequences of the full chain of custody, I guess, and the full supply chain of, the demand that we have as society to this incredible insatiable appetite for stuff, and the way that we're trying to transform our world to try to meet these sustainable development goals, but also to find alternative sources of clean energy, that we're not in fact causing huge environmental and social impact where those raw materials are sourced from. And then finally, I just wanted to reflect on this need, because there are these externalities, these environmental and social impacts that are often associated with producing stuff and the kind of the economic development of stuff, that we need to look far more closely at the whole circularity and of raw materials too. So this goes back to the kind of fantastic role that aluminium is playing, I guess, in the recyclability and the reuse, and how we've got to reduce those externalities and start to actually be more efficient in the way that we are producing materials and using materials. So yeah, this is all very real, and this year we are looking forward to the UK hosting the G7, and no doubt the G7 meeting will entail a huge range of issues, but climate's going to be up there, and biodiversity loss, and the role that nature will play in our recovery post-pandemic is absolutely fundamental, and that will be picked up again at the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity COP, and again at the Convention for Climate at Glasgow to see if we can actually deliver on our Paris agreements, and beyond that into the post-2020 agenda, where we have to start to reverse the decline in the loss of biodiversity and actually recover and restore the ecosystems, because otherwise we won't be able to manage our climate impacts, and society will start to lose the ecosystem services or the benefits that we get from nature. these big sustainable development goals, the big HE targets, the Paris Agreement, if we all are responsible for our own piece of that, and that knocks on into the organizations that we work with and work for, and that we partner with and we collaborate with, and that all has an incredible, a kind of powerful effect to actually deal with these global crises that we're presented with.
We have been asked to talk through the experience of revising the ASI standards, so we've sat down today to do just that. I'm Kendall Salcido, the Civil Society Chair of the Standards Committee.
And I am Rosa Garcia Piñeiro, the co-chair representing the Industry and the Standards Committee. And we are going to take 5 minutes to talk about the process, the progress, the aspirations, and many more things. Okay, so I will kick this off with a question about the process.
So we've finalized the first round of public consultation and are working through the comments now. And maybe, Rosa, you want to add to that?
Yeah, while we are waiting for comments, though, we undertook additional work to increase the rigor of standardization across geographies, so we're still hard at work. In March, we started reviewing criteria that have been unevenly implemented across the range of environmental, social, and governance indicators to seek external support on better benchmarking certifying members' progress against them.
Absolutely. And that work is still ongoing, and it's going to continue throughout this year. The Standards Committee felt that it was really important to start tackling it now rather than wait till the next standards revision. But that'll take us at least through this year. And then let's turn to the progress that we've made in the draft of the standards. Rosa, what are your thoughts?
Well, from an industry perspective, I have to say that I'm very thankful for having the opportunity to interact with such a number of stakeholders. We had customers, we have users of Aluminium, and we have civil society that participated in this process. And this gave us the opportunity to listen to their ambitions and their expectations on the industry, not only for today, but also for the years to come.
And from a human rights and social standpoint, this draft just has a lot more transparency and public reporting in it. We've made major progress in meaningfully aligning to conflict mineral standards and human rights due diligence and stakeholder engagement that are essentially expected at the international level now.
And those added strengths are really an added strength for the industry as well. Even if they, at the beginning, they might really look like short-term burden for operations. But on that note, let's talk a bit about what your hopes are for this standard and process.
Well, on the process side, I'm really hoping for an affirming public consultation process, but I'm ready to really fine-tune the language so that our heightened expectations for industry are recognized as attainable, as doable.
Yeah, sure. And on the side of the standard itself, my hope is that the standard is really acknowledged and implemented by as many players in the industry as possible. This will be the real success, to bring the full industry together, a level up.
Oh my gosh, that's a great answer. I love that there's so much cohesion in this standards committee to really tackle the tough issues. Going forward, what do you see as sort of the toughest challenges that we've addressed and are addressing in this standards revision?
Well, there were a few through the process, but I would say that greenhouse gases and our aims for 2030 have been really the biggest one of them. This is a real challenge and involves an incredible amount of time that different members have invested.
Just on a logistical side, just doing all of this remotely across every time zone on the planet has been a challenge. And we've asked a lot of the standards committee to get this draft out there. I think another real challenge, now and going forward is that our standard is taking the lead on some social and human rights issues and getting concrete human rights due diligence and raising the bar for auditors is a real challenge. So implementing this across political geographies consistently is something that we've thought a lot about, but have more work to do on, I think.
Yeah, and we are close to time here. Do you have any general reflections you want to share?
You know, I'm just really proud of how far we've come, and I'm really keen to see what the public consultation brings.
Absolutely. And with that, I think we're at time. Thank you, Board of Directors, for your time and your support on this process.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sasha Corville. I'm an independent director of the ASI Board and chair of the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee is one of two subcommittees of the board. I would like to acknowledge other members of the Finance Committee, including Jan Bokkelman, Marcel van der Sloos, and last but not least, Tolga Egelmetzer, who has just stepped down from the board and has been an amazing co-chair of the committee. I'd like to share with you some highlights from the ASI's 2020 financial statements, our investment plan for 2021, and conclude with a few thoughts on the broader context for sustainable financial investment. First, the 2020 financial results. A signed copy of ASI's financial statements and director's report were emailed to members along with the notice for this AGM. In accordance with Australian law, it is not necessary for members to vote on or otherwise approve these statements. However, in the interest of transparency and visibility, you're welcome to raise any questions or comments during the panel discussion. The headline is that ASI finished 2020 with a net surplus of 1.1 million Australian dollars on revenue of just over 3 million Australian dollars. This is an exceptionally positive result that was achieved through a range of factors. From a normal business perspective, these include that the board had set a conservative budget which included a surplus for 2020 to grow ASI's reserves and increase resilience in a time of global volatility. ASI gained 40 new members in 2020 despite the pandemic and maintained strong member retention. And there was a positive revenue impact from Australian-US dollar exchange rates, which for much of the year were highly beneficial to ASI. The COVID pandemic, of course, brought more unusual contributions to the 2020 results. Due to restrictions and risks, we had very limited expenditure on travel and in-person meetings. And in Australia, where ASI is incorporated, the Australian government provided a cash flow boost of $100,000 to eligible businesses. This very positive result in 2020 gives ASI the opportunity to further invest and build reserves in 2021. Both at Finance Committee discussions and with the board, we discussed the importance of balancing the need to ensure ASI is in a strong financial position at a time of ongoing global uncertainty, while also investing in what members value. The board has agreed that investment priorities include to further expand the ASI team in standards, impacts, and digital work programs, such as data visualization projects, further investment in the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Forum activities, a wide range of project activities and collaborations, including on key topics such as greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity, human rights, and responsible sourcing, trademark registrations for core ASI logo assets, and to further increase financial reserves from 30% to 32% of annual expenditure. The 2021 budget breakdown shows that about 2/3 of expenditure this year will be towards the ASI Secretariat itself, with the remainder split across projects, general operating expenses, and a still small allocation for governance meetings and travel as we await a return to post-pandemic life. The ASI Board will be doing more this year to work on long-term financial projections and planning with the confidence of strong and sustained growth over the last 5 years. Finally, I'd like to conclude with some general thoughts on the rapidly changing context for financial investment. Outside of ASI, my day job is Executive of Social Impact at the National Australia Bank, a major commercial bank in Australia. But just to be clear, I'm an independent board member and I don't represent NAB here. ESG factors, or environment, social, and governance factors, are increasingly central to decisions around access to capital, be that access to debt or equity. The rate at which this is moving is exponential. Even in the last year, it's moved from slightly tangential issues to becoming front and center, both in terms of risk management as well as business opportunity considerations. Central to this is a focus on climate change. There is a growing movement by financial regulators all over the world to ensure that the financial sector plays a key role in driving action on climate change. Starting from the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, the TCFD, with an increasing number of jurisdictions actually mandating disclosures. The rapid growth of net zero corporate commitments from banks, insurance companies, investors, but also every sector you can think of, and now increasing expectations on setting science-based targets to outline what progress towards net zero means in the short to medium term. While this space is still evolving, expect significant refinement, standardization, and verification of methodologies. This will only continue to accelerate, leading to the COP in Glasgow and beyond. Of course, climate's not the only focus of attention. Of all parts of the economy, the investor segment has really picked up the Sustainable Development Goals and used them as a categorization tool to drive investment. For example, biodiversity loss and ecosystem services degradation is increasingly gaining momentum within the financial sector, with a task force on nature-related financial disclosures underway. This might take a little while to work through, partly because of the need to crack metrics and data sets at scale to be able to incorporate biodiversity and ecosystem services into decision-making, but this will come. While the G, or governance elements, have always been an absolute focus for the financial sector, and E, environment, is well and truly covered, the S, or the social part of ESG, is really picking up as well. With the rise of modern slavery legislation in different jurisdictions, financial sector organizations need to ensure that their suppliers and their customers are managing human rights risks in their own supply chains. Respect for Indigenous rights is an ongoing focus of attention, made even more relevant due to events of the past couple of years. So what does this mean for the aluminium industry and associated industries? Well, given the capital-intensive nature of the industry, it's critical to understand evolving expectations of the financial sector. There are significant opportunities in terms of access to finance for sustainability leaders who can demonstrate their credentials. Whole new asset classes and taxonomies are being developed for carbon transition finance or sustainability-linked loans that provide a reduced interest rate for meeting agreed sustainability targets. These financing arrangements will only continue to grow and indeed will become the norm for financing in the future. They depend on credible standards and assurance systems to underpin them, so ASI has a key role to play here. That concludes our formal AGM presentations, and we are happy to answer any questions you have in the Q&A session coming up.
And hello, I'm Fiona Solomon and I'm the CEO of ASI. Thanks very much for joining us at today's annual general meeting. We've got more than 120 people attending, which is fantastic. So we have had pre-recorded presentations to date, but we're now opening up for a live panel session with our directors who are all present and turning on their cameras, getting ready. So you can direct questions to the board through the Q&A box, which is down the bottom of your screen, and you can put them in named or also either anonymously if you choose. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can during our session, and we'll either try and answer them live by posing them to the directors, or some might be answered just online if they're factual or what have you. And if we can't get to some of the questions today, we'll definitely try and answer them in a future members update or similar. So I'm going to kick off first while you're getting your thinking together and thinking of some questions for us. I'm going to kick off with some questions to some of the board directors that you haven't heard from in the presentation so far. So that's Nick Madden, Marcel van der Sluis, Jan Bokelman, Alexi Spirin, and Jerome Perez. So Nick, we're going to start with you. I wonder if you'd be able to reflect on some of the horizon and longer term challenges for the aluminium industry. Don't forget to unmute yourself as you kick off. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, I represent the production and transformation sector on the board. And in ASI strategy, it was on one of the very early slides in the video. The question about looking into the future is lead beyond certification. So how does ASI lead beyond certification. If I put it in the context of the industry, which I thought was brilliantly portrayed by the other board members in the video, the outlook for aluminium is extraordinarily positive. And I think most companies that are represented on this call will be looking ahead and seeing growth for years to come. And it's because, aluminium, I think we all sincerely believe is a material of choice for a sustainable world. And that's because of physics, because of its lightweight, corrosion resistance, conductivity, appearance, and ultimately recyclability, which is so key. But with the growth come challenges. And again, I think the board members have done an excellent job of articulating some of the background of those challenges. And ultimately, I think it's summarized by there will be increasing focus on supply chain from an ESG perspective. And I believe Sasha's finishing remarks are really telling when she talked about sustainable development goals becoming a filter for allocation of capital. I mean, what this really does is it closes the loop on the industry between investment and growth. So if the industry is to grow, is going to have to attract investment. To attract that investment, it is critical that we meet expectations of ESG. So I think there'll be a big focus on our impact on our footprint, on climate change, and on society. So when I look at it from a company's perspective, I represent one of the companies that's in ASI. When I look ahead, in the past, we've been very focused on safety and environmental questions and volume and profit. But now I think increasingly performance is very seriously evaluated through an ESG lens from a company point of view. And I think as we look ahead, companies will start reevaluating their current markets and the markets in which they would like to participate. And I think some of those decisions we made from an ESG perspective. So, is this product linear? Is it going to be used once and thrown away? Or is it a circular product? Is it going to be recycled? Is it recyclable? Is it actually recycled? Because of course, if it is recycled and it has a high recycled content, it will have very positive CO2 credentials. And then secondly, does it bring benefits in use to society? For instance, the lightweighting of vehicles, electrification in general in transport, corrosion resistance in architecture, recyclability of beverage cans. All those support the longer term ESG credentials of those product choices. So I believe through that filter, if the products meet a circularity and benefit to society expectations, it's a sustainable product. And I think this is probably where the industry is headed longer term. But in that process, operationally, we have to be very transparent and demonstrate that our footprint, to society, for the society to have confidence in us, which ultimately translates through investment. And so what's ASI's role in all of this? Well, ASI's role is incredibly important. I think that was very well stressed in the earlier presentations. Just like this standards review is incredibly important because it's my belief longer term, ASI has to be the go-to standard for not just 168 companies, but for the entire industry. And so I think the question to me that as we start to reflect on the longer term direction for ASI and what the industry, aluminium industry requires, how do we partner together? How does ASI partner together effectively to ensure that aluminium remains a material of choice? And this is crucial, as mentioned, because ultimately allocation of capital will decide what the growth potential is of our material. So the question is, how does ASI partner with the aluminium industry? How does ASI scale up to meet the industry's future needs? And if I just quote Daniel from his video, how does ASI partner with the industry to make sure we remain in the future what good looks like? So I think that's my reflection on those longer term thoughts, Fiona.
Thanks, Nick. That was fantastic. Marcel, we'll turn to you next, so you can unmute as I'm asking this question. So I'm wondering, we've had very turbulent last 12 months with the COVID pandemic. And, as a business owner yourself, I'm wondering if you'd be able to reflect on some of the COVID and non-COVID challenges to business over that time and looking ahead as well.
Yeah, thank you, Verna. Well, honored to answer this broad question, because businesses are attacked by everything indirect and direct related to COVID. So I will focus on the COVID-related issues, some of it. A lot of people have bad experiences in this world around COVID. So if I'm trying to be positive, don't be offended. It's a hard times for all of us. Well, I think two things are in the center of managerial focus more than ever. It's first is health, especially in the ASI supply chain. A lot of people, it's a lot of labor force working, and from bauxite mining to industrial companies like my own company. A lot of people working on this supply chain, and we can't work only with robots, and we have to work with people working together. So millions of people are dependent on a healthy environment to work and a healthy planet to live on. And I think that's one of the main points of focus of ASI and for businesses at the moment. How to keep my workforce able to work in a healthy environment, but also closely together, because we are all human beings, and especially as a board, we are a very worldwide spread board. We have been able to cooperate, but not as human beings. And in organizations like mine, people like to make jokes with each other, and that makes the communication fluid and the cooperation more fluid. So for me, and I think a lot of people and organizations struggle with that, health and cooperation as human beings together is a very essential point at this moment. On the other hand, there's an organizational type of crisis going on in this world. We are, since the middle of the 70s, 80s, we are Kaizen, lean, operational excellence oriented. We are a profit, money-centered world. And everything is surrounded by that, focused on profit making and individualized specialists centered in this world. So we are not concentrated, we are global, we're globalized. But then again, on the other hand, we are specialized and very widespread all over the world. It's not an aluminum kind of type of case, but when I eat apples, at this moment, they come from Chile, in Europe. And I live here in the Betuwe, what we call the center of the apple industry of the Netherlands. So it's a weird world. I can buy my cheese, my Dutch cheese, cheaper in Germany than at home. So it's a weird world. And I think that's those of the enormous impacts on health, working together, and the way we work and live on this planet. And that's the negative side. But again, that's also the positive side. Because although it's an enormous disaster going on, and I've got friends in Aligarh, northern India, they struggle for life with all their people in the labor force. And so it's enormous tragedies going on, but it's a chance. It's a chance to rethink for all stakeholders of this planet, our way we behave, the way we address biodiversity, address indigenous people, address other thinking people, address certification standards. When we are certified, that's not a point. We're in the middle of a tipping point in our thinking about this world. And when I get on the philosophical way, it's 11:45 or 5 minutes to 12. It's we have to turn, we have to rethink all processes from bauxite mining to industrial use to consumerism. And I think as a board, and I'm very honored to be on this broad platform of all kinds of people from all over the world and all kinds of organizations. I think it's the best moment in time in my life, in our lives, to rethink the way we work together, we live on this planet, and how we, I call that how we keep this world safe for all stakeholders. And all stakeholders is, for instance, also giving 3 human rights or rights. But the UN is also trying to start up, give a mountain rights, give people rights to cooperate. Well, that's my point of view. Although I'm running a business here, a lot of is going on about profit. But the best way to cope with this planet is to have a safe and healthy environment, and then as a second point, profit. So I think we're, as ASI, are in the middle of that. We have a very good chance to support this rethinking of the world, and in our enhance objectives to think beyond our certification process. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcel. Jan, turning to you, you're part of the Finance and Audit Committee, and I know we're going to be doing some work on longer term financial projections, and I was wondering if you can reflect a little bit on some of the thinking for that you might have and be bringing to the table.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I'll reflect on that, but I'll start with a little introduction, because in my experience, when you start talking about long-term financial projections, that's always the moment for a natural break for many people attending a webinar. And that's obviously something which we don't want to do now. So in ASI, we tend to look at the world around us and look at all the processes which happen in industry around us instead of looking at ourselves. You could say that looking at ASI itself is important as well. As Marcel just said, the health of the organization is an important element to think about. And that's all related to just looking at ASI itself, and particularly its financials itself. And at the moment, you may raise a few questions. How robust is our long-term business model from a financial perspective for sudden unexpected events? We've seen the COVID pandemic, that worked out quite well. But for whatever reason, it could have worked out the other way as well. So is our equity position long-term on the balance sheet good enough to basically cover and to respond to that volatility? Something to bear in mind. And thirdly, which is closely connected to that, is are our contribution rates long-term sustainable? Are they correct, actually? And obviously, we don't know any precise answer at this very moment. Otherwise, we would not be working on these models. But the solution we've chosen so far is that, well, you look at the short-term operations, with which financial results come out of those. They seem to be fine. Well, it looks as if we're on the right track. And the same for the equity position. We apply some rule of thumbs to ensure that, we have some amount and something which everybody can understand on a gut feel basis. But what we try to do with these models is to make it a bit more precise and a bit more concrete. As a wise person has once said, nothing is as difficult to predict as the future. But anyway, that's something which we're going to try now. And in these models, so first of all, we prepare our strategy. Well, we have that already, and obviously it's refined every now and then, but still it is there. But then the second step is that we have to take from our strategy some really precise long-term goals in quantitative terms. We're not that strong yet. So how many members do we want to have in 10 years' time? How many certifications may we want to have in 10 years' time? What kind of coverage from the full industry perspective would we strive for, etc., etc. The third aspect, which then comes in, is an inflation exchange rate. Well, those you can predict or you can take from good banks. There's a National Australia Bank's excellent bank, which makes those predictions as well. You work on your cost base, obviously the people who sit in there, and then you try to develop some kind of base scenario with one or two alternative scenarios on the back of which you try to establish that everything you've done is smart or is not smart. And that's the most important part, actually. Not that this model is so very important, but the outcome is a starting point for a discussion. And that's basically what you want to have when you do these type of exercises. So that in a nutshell is what's planned in the context of the Finance Committee on the long-term financial health of ASI, a tool which Daniel said we have excellent tools. Well, this is a tool which we still need to develop and which we will develop in the rest of this year. Thank you, Fiona.
Thanks, Jan. So we'll turn to our two new directors now, Jerome and Alexi, and I'm wondering if you can both reflect on, as new directors whose terms have just started, basically in the last few weeks, what has drawn you to serve on the ASI board? Jerome, we'll turn to you first, and then Alexi.
Thank you, Fiona. Good.
Perfect.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So first, for me, it's a pleasure to be here for my first assembly. And even if in reality ASI is not fully new for me, because I had the privilege back to 2010 to launch ASI in Jeju in South Korea. So this is why probably also for me it was an evidence that I wanted to contribute to the success of this organization, that for me is essential. So even if I do not represent my organization, the reality is that I'm here because of my professional experience, and I'm currently the global head of sustainability of Nespresso. And for this organization, the aluminium is essential for the quality of the coffee. There is no high quality coffee protected in a better way than in aluminium packaging. So for us, really committed to sustainability, it was an evidence that we had to do with aluminium what we were doing for the rest of our value chain. Specifically, we are a coffee company, so our sourcing program and sustainability sourcing program is quite advanced. But sustainability, and I used to say that often in strategy, you hear that you have to prioritize and to select what you want to do or not. And I used to say that on sustainability, you cannot. You have to act on everything. And for us, it was really important to have high quality sustainable aluminium with traceability and etc. And it was impossible to do it without an organization like ASI. So for the challenges we have in front of us globally and beyond my organization or beyond ASI, we discussed already a lot climate change, biodiversity loss, so everything related to water and the impact on population, on local population. It's impossible to tackle these issues by working alone. And what I have learned in my last 12 years on sustainability, knowing that before I was working in finance, and I made the choice 12 years ago to engage on sustainability because it's really important to my heart. What I've learned is that it's impossible to do this transformation without strong partnership, without a multi-stakeholder approach. And Daniel Weston was mentioning this strength and this successful achievement with the multi-stakeholder approach of ASI. And I do believe that this is the key for success in what we want to do. So for me, it was important to continue to contribute to that and to bring modestly what I can bring to the organization. I think that on sustainability, for me, among all these issues that we have, all these challenges, there are two things that are really important to be successful. One is the governance, and the second one is to be able at some point to value natural capital. And I do believe that when it's about aluminium, ASI has a key role to play on that. I've been already playing a role on this, and for me to be able to contribute to this is something really exciting. So thank you for having me on board.
Thanks, Jerome. And Alexi?
Thanks, Fiona. Hello, everyone. It was pleased to me to participate in my also first AGM meeting as a ASI director, as one of the ASI directors. So as for me, I will be very short. Sorry. As for me, I think I don't need to understand why ASI plays a very important role in aluminium industry worldwide. But from my point of view, the initiative need to be more strong and need to engage as much producers of aluminium and goods from aluminium, produced from aluminium, as much as possible, without losing of credibility of the initiative itself, because it's very important. So from my previous experience, I have been involved in for several years in ASI working groups and different ASI working groups, and also I have been participated in ASI standard committee, but I understood that the participation in the standard improvements itself is not enough. So this is why I have decided to join ASI Board, just to make valuable input from my side into the initiative development, to make it more popular, more ambitious, and more recognizable by other similar initiatives that intersect ASI scope. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alexi. So we have some good questions coming in through the chat box. Thank you very much for those. I'm going to start with one of the early ones, which is looking at perhaps attention, I suppose, in terms of the pool for uptake, whether that's from a chain of custody point of view, downstream customers looking to source responsibly from their supply chain, versus or as well as sort of the drivers from the financial and the investment sector, as Sasha and Nick have certainly touched on. One perhaps looking at a product level with the COC standard, with the chain of custody standard particularly, and the investment side perhaps more looking at the performance standard and particular metrics being met in terms of asset performance. So I'm wondering, I'm just going to open it up to anyone on the board who might like to comment on that, and maybe I might look at Nick or Sasha first, but I'm happy to hear from anybody who might like to address that question. Let me know if I need to restate it. Nick or Sasha? Yeah, go.
Can you turn it into just a little question, just to make sure?
So yes, well, the board is going to be doing some thinking this year about sort of horizon challenges and perhaps just these different drivers or parties in terms of pressure on uptake. Where will the more weight come from, do you think? Will it come from downstream pull? Will it come from the investment sector? All of the above? How do we balance those demands? Are there perhaps different emphases that we might place and so on?
Okay, yeah, sorry to ask you to repeat it. Yeah, I think
no.
It's not a straightforward answer because it's a very complicated question. It's kind of the question that we want to address in ASI about what is our role. I mean, is the role of ASI to try and drive recruitment, or is it to respond to the industry's requirement for recruitment? I mean, I don't know, if the ASI is as pushy as it should be, or if it's behaving in a way that its members expect. Ultimately, my belief is, and what my desire would be, if it's like any platform, if there's one member, it doesn't have much value. If there's, close to 100% membership, it's invaluable. And so I think, it's in the industry's interest, and that's why I use that word partner, to work with ASI on what is the right, level at which we play, what kind of role can ASI play to help? Is it a leadership role? Is it a support role? And I think, how do we address that? Well, I think we need to listen to the leaders of those member companies and get their perspective on how they see us playing, because I think whilst we obviously get great input from the board, great input from the kind of technical input from the members, representatives of the members, I do think there's a strategic vision level that we could also use a little bit of input from some industry leaders. And that would be a broad approach, I think, would be my suggestion.
Thanks, Nick. Anyone else wanted to come in on that discussion?
Yeah. Well, I can confirm that we are lucky to have a broad membership diversity, industrial users, but producers as well. And for myself, I'm working on the industrial user side with consumer articles, and I see a lot of industries rethinking their ASG goals, working with them, putting new standards internally already up. And you see a lot of people and a lot of clients from me trying to set up true pricing initiatives internally. So they're trying to set up to give a kind of product when it's a little bit cheaper, it has lower points on the true pricing. And if you want to buy a true priced, more sustainable product, it's more expensive, but it gets more points. And you see there are a lot of industries trying to set up or trying to do things like that. And I think we're going to feel that as ASI.
Thanks. There's actually a related question here, touching on this issue of uptake and where it's coming from, and also the role of ASI. I think, Nick, you touched on, how aggressively, is it our role to kind of to encourage and to kind of bring in different parts of the supply chain. And the question is basically that there's still many missing connecting dots in terms of full ASI aluminium supply chains, ASI aluminium streams from mining to smelter. And what's the role, do you think, of ASI to connect those dots? We've got good uptake when you look at the certification distribution, in the semi-fabrication stage, whereas it tapers off upstream, which of course can be concentrated, but also downstream, which we know can be very diverse and fragmented. Anita, would you like to kind of reflect on sort of ASI's role in reaching out, to some of these sectors and encouraging uptake and providing the tools to enable that to happen? Don't forget to unmute, Anita, if you wanted to answer.
Thanks, Fiona. No, I was just reaching across. Thanks. You're sort of stealing my thunder for the end when I was going to talk a little bit about stakeholder engagement. So I'm going to keep this very short and just say, absolutely, we should be engaging in partnership all the way through as an organisation. And I think Tad said it right at the start, we're an organisation that's built, core is communication and dialogue is at the heart of everything we do. And that is reaching out to all our stakeholders and all those that we interact with and all to foster that leadership and partnership through the whole of our value and aluminium chain. If we don't do that, I think we've talked about growth today, we've talked about transparency, but if we don't partner with those that have similar goals to us, we will never get that credibility that I think Alexi was mentioning that we need to build to strengthen the foundations that have been built over the last 5 years. So partnerships is, I think, at the heart of what we do. I noticed another question in the chat room too about, are there other organisations that do similar things to ASI? I think we have to search out those groups that do similar things. I don't think there's a group that does identical things to ASI. Again, as we talked earlier, our governance structures are leading edge. We should build on that strength of ASI when we talk to those partners. How can we share some of the experiences that we've got, some of those leading edge governance issues, and share those with some of those like organisations so that we can mutually grow together? And I think that's where our strengths lie. So I'll leave it there, Fiona.
Thanks, Anita, and thanks for picking up that other question about other initiatives. Certainly there is no analogue to ASI, as Anita said. There are other things that work on subsets of the topics, or perhaps in other commodities, for example. But yes, certainly ASI is unique for aluminium, but we do a lot of work in terms of harmonisation and collaboration across those different sectors. There was also a question about responsible steel. So that's one example of a program that's emerging for that sector. Definitely using ASI as a model, and we're collaborating with them about, exactly as Anita said, sharing those kinds of assurance approaches, governance approaches, and things like that, which we hope they also find useful. Sasha, I saw you kind of had your hand up maybe, and wanted to add something.
No, I was just going to, thank you, Fiona. I was just going to say that I think on the question of kind of still need for connecting the dots in different places in the value chain, I think we have always tried to do both, take a pragmatic approach in terms of where the low-hanging fruit is, where the momentum is building as a very tiny organization, starting a very large feat, trying to kind of work through that at the same time, taking a strategic approach as well. And I think we will need to continue to balance that as we progress. We've looked at from a geographic lens. We need to do more from a full value chain lens. And in terms of whether it's performance standards or chain of custody, I don't see it's one or the other, and they need to go hand in hand. I think we do need to map that a little bit more in terms of where there are dependencies between unlocking kind of big opportunities of interest to members, and look at that over a time horizon as well. We can't do everything at what point in time, but we want to be clever, and we do need to respond to the needs of members. So I think there's both a pragmatic and a strategic approach to be taken.
Thanks, Sasha. So we have a question too about sort of the biodiversity and ecosystem destruction type issues that certainly Pippa raised in her presentation. And the question is really about what will be some of the measures. Will it be things like no net loss or net positive by 2025? And while this might be asking the question for the standard, I'm asking it to the board from the point of view of where the targets are going to be coming from some of these international meetings. So Pippa, and then maybe back to you, Sasha, because I know that's something you touched on too.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. I think it's a very pertinent question, because the standards out there are starting to really demand no net loss or net positive impact commitments, and how we tailor our own performance standards to actually meet with those. We have to keep up with the times, I guess, is the short of it. There are, probably close to 48 countries now, and if you think about the Equator Principal Finance institutions, the International Finance Corporation, some of the very big development banks that are funding these types of projects, whether it's a mine or kind of some form of industrial development, they're all looking for commitments from companies to deliver on net positive impact, but also specific projects to do that too. So it's partly a conditionality around the financing of those projects, but equally stakeholders are starting to put a lot of pressure, and given the trajectory of the agenda around biodiversity, these are almost going to be sort of de facto requirements in the future. And so, when we get the outcomes from the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity COP at the end of the year, it's likely that companies will be asked to play a very significant role in the recovery of nature.
And just to add, in terms of kind of the standards and metrics, I think there is the work that I've been involved in Australia. We've been trying to kind of, I think we've had a few different phases of it. There's been a experimentation phase in terms of what different metrics and data sets can we collect, what exists, how to bring them together. And there's an initiative that is called a natural capital catalog that's really kind of bringing a whole range of different kind of metrics for different land uses together at the moment. And that's I guess it's not a harmonization tool, but it's a categorization tool to try to understand how to bring them together. And then I think there will then be an alignment / harmonization phase, right? So they go in phases. The other thing I think for biodiversity and ecosystem services is whatever metrics are aligned, we have to be able to think of them in terms of nesting. So you need to be able to think of them at a particular place And then you need to think of them from a particular land manager. You need to think about them from a regional perspective, an ecosystem perspective, and regional, national scale. So how do we make sure that the metrics allow for different uses for different and different levels of granularity?
Thanks, Sasha.
The short of it, Fiona, in that answer, Sasha, is that it's not that simple, is it? You know, finding metrics for biodiversity is a lot more complex than carbon, which I guess you're going to get to next. But
well, there's many, right? And so that's the thing, is to have more. And then the question is, well, what is appropriate in what context?
Exactly. And, you know, there's lots of rules around things like ecosystem-based metrics or species-based metrics, quality hectares around different habitat metrics. So there's a lot of work going on in the background to try and get some resolution to make it easier for everyone.
Thanks both. So we do have a number of questions in here that are sort of asking about where things might go with the performance standard. It's not something that the board can answer, or even myself can answer at the moment, because those discussions are really in progress with the standards committee. So things like, would carbon credit certificates and offsets be allowed under greenhouse gas emissions? They're the kinds of things that are going to be developed in the greenhouse gas guidance that the standards committee are working on. There's a question around some of the common themes and concerns that have been identified so far from the public consultation, particularly in the governance and social criteria. So I'll undertake that we'll provide a bit more of an update, a bit more of a drill down on that in sort of a future member update or stakeholder newsletter. There's a question about whether ASI sees a role for itself in describing the route towards net zero carbon emissions for aluminium. We're actually having a conversation this week about commissioning some work, some detailed work next year, building on obviously what's come out this week with IEA, what the work that International Aluminium Institute have done looking at 2050 and so on, and starting to drill down into that a little bit more, hopefully in partnership with IEI. So that's definitely something that we want to becoming more involved with. There's a comment too about, or a question around, you know, is the standards, are ASI standards becoming more complex? And we know this was a bit of a theme in the consultation that came in, becoming more complex, particularly for small to medium-sized companies. So I think that that's certainly a theme that the standards committee have identified as something they want to look at. The current version of the standards and guidance does speak to, you know, particular guidance for SMEs about what this might look like in a smaller business. So I think that's something that they're definitely taking on board. We're looking at ideas, for example, around an SME working group, specifically to have a forum to discuss that. The standards committee is at the moment largely made up of larger companies. So the idea of having a forum to hear those voices of smaller companies, recognizing, of course, that part of the issue is capacity, but we are, you know, looking at that question and thinking about how we can engage more effectively on that. There's a question around recycling and advocacy efforts by ASI, policy work with governments and countries. That's not something that we've really engaged in to date. And we do have, as a membership class, associations that are playing that kind of advocacy and local engagement role. So we really see ASI's role at the moment as creating that bridge to that local association work. And that's something that we would really like to certainly strengthen with our association members. The standards revision process that we're undertaking at the moment is really resource intensive, both for the Secretariat, but also all of our members, you know, thinking carefully about the revisions, contributing to that process, participating in working groups and so on, as well as any certification kind of deadlines and so on that people are working towards. But once we get past this sort of furball, you know, of a revision process, there's certainly things that we want to be deepening some of those connections with advocacy and that whole partnership and collaborative model that Anita certainly spoke about. So I think we're coming to the end of time. I want to thank everybody that has put questions in. We will capture these and those that we haven't been able to address during the session and have some extra communication on that. But I'll hand back to Anita, who is of course the chair of the meeting, to wrap up and to formally close the meeting for us. Thanks, Anita.
Thanks, Fiona, and thank you all for participating in the AGM. I hope you've enjoyed the new format for the AGM that we tried tonight. We look forward to receiving your feedback on that. As we mentioned during the discussion, you know, for me, ASI is just such an organisation that it's so at the core of the centre of what we do is an organisation that's built around communication, listening to our members and our stakeholders, and And we've seen that tonight with which is fantastic, the range of questions that we've had. And we all know it's been a difficult year for doing that, for connecting with our stakeholders and our members. And that's an absolute high priority of mine, is going forward, is as soon as practicable, as soon as it's safe to do so, is to find a way for us to get together face to face. It's something that I commit to doing with all of you, that we will do as soon as we've seen tonight, and as we've heard tonight, members have continued to find a way to engage during this whole process with ASI, which is fantastic. And going forward, I will be working really closely with my fellow directors, with the Secretariat, with Fiona, to find new ways to continue to connect with the members and stakeholders so that we can move this agenda forward that we've been talking about. Nick talked about beyond certification. That's the next step for the board, is to work on. Now we've been going for 5 years very successfully. What's the next step? What's the next step we're going to take? How do we foster sustainability practice across the aluminium industry to take that next step, to take that, well, what is that next step? But we need you, the members, to tell us. We need your input into that process. It's not for us as the board. I've talked about how daunting it is to follow in Daniel's footsteps, but my goodness, how much easier is it when you see the quality of the board that we have working with us, and you've seen the board tonight, and I hope you've got to know them a little bit better. So that's really all I've got to say, other than in closing, I want to thank Fiona and her team for all the work, not just that she's done tonight in putting together the AGM, but the work she does, she and the team, right throughout the year. Because of course, ASI, as I've said all along, is all about people. And that starts with our Secretariat. So Fiona, thank you to you and the Secretariat. And also to everybody out there, thank you again for participating. And I think all that's left for me is to formally close the AGM for 2021. And again, thank you all for participating. And I really do look forward to meeting you all in person one day. Bye for now.